No bond, charged with murdering his mother and 15-year-old brother. Police say the mother, identified as Dana Jenkins, and the juvenile were found inside a home on Snowden Drive Monday.
Yeah, CBS 17's Barron James joins us live outside that home tonight. Barron, you've learned Jenkins was on parole after being released from prison just last week.
Yeah, Angela and Liz. In fact, 1 week ago today, his family tells me, he got out of prison and came here to this house, this duplex, his mom's home, apartment A, where police found the suspect as well as the bodies of his mother and little brother.
He knew they was coming to get him.
Will's next door, Wanilla Carnegie, told me she dreaded this day would come.
I'm hurt because I knew he was going to do something. You can just see he was so fidgetive. He was so anxious. He could not stay still. He had that sneakiness about him. You know what I mean? Like a crazy person trying to get ready to do something, like premeditation. He's looking like he just got out of a mental ward, or he's getting ready to do something, or he have done something, because the look on his face told me that he done something.
Now listen, I need to share something with this community that's been weighing heavy on my heart. On March 25th, 2025, a mother named Dana Jenkins typed 8 words on Facebook that would haunt everyone who knew her. She wrote, "My baby is home. Lord, I thank you." Just 8 words. But those words carried 3 years of prayers, pain, and a mother's unshakable hope. 6 days later, Dana Jenkins and her 15-year-old son, Darren, were found dead in their home in Wilson, North Carolina. And the person responsible, the very son she had just welcomed back with open arms. Can we talk about this for a second? Because what happened in Wilson shook me to my core, and I know it's gonna shake you too. This is about a mother's love, the kind that sees good even when everyone else sees danger. This is about warning signs that were ignored and a family that paid the ultimate price for believing love could save someone who didn't want to be saved. Let me break this down for you, because the details of this case reveal something we need to understand as a community. Dana Jenkins was one of those women who made you feel like everything was going to be alright. Born and raised in Wilson, North Carolina, she was the kind of person whose presence just made a room feel warmer. This woman worked full-time, stayed active at Mount Moriah Community Church, and still found time to check on neighbors, give rides to folks who needed them, and bring meals to anyone going through hard times. Her cousin Wanilla Carnegie, who lived right next door, described Dana like,
She was a very sweet person. Always smiled. I can see her smile right now. She always smiled.
Wanilla Carnegie lives next door to her cousin Dana Jenkins.
That smile, that warmth, that was Dana Jenkins. She didn't just talk about her faith, she lived it every single day. She was raising 2 sons, and despite all the challenges life threw at her, she never stopped trying, never stopped loving, never stopped believing people could change. Her youngest son, Darren Cox, was her absolute joy. At 15 years old, this boy was everything a mother could pray for. His teachers at Bedingfield High School said he was the kind of student who lit up a classroom. He was on the honor roll, showed leadership potential, and had this quiet confidence that made you believe he was going places. But it wasn't just academics where Darren excelled. At Mount Moriah Community Church, this young man was giving back to his community. He helped run the media team, volunteered at youth events, and played music during services. The pastor and church members would later say they loved each other.
They loved each other. They loved us. We loved them, especially Darren. He meant the world to all of us. Our teens here, they're grieving heavily.
The relationship between Dana and her youngest son was something beautiful to witness. They weren't just mother and son, they were partners. They laughed together, cooked together, prayed together. Friends often said they looked more like best friends than parent and child. When Dana talked about Darren, her whole face would change. He was her purpose, her pride, her reason to keep pushing forward, no matter how hard life got. Now Dana had another son, 25-year-old Darren Jenkins. And this is where our story takes a turn that every mother in this community needs to pay attention to. Darren had been in prison for 3 years. His charges, breaking and entering and larceny of firearms.
But here's where Dana was caught lagging, because I'm sure it wasn't a secret that his criminal record went back years.
At 19, he was arrested for stealing from cars in a church parking lot. Can you believe that? A church parking lot. At 21, he broke into a neighbor's home and took 3 guns. But it wasn't just his crimes on the outside that should have been a warning. While Darren was locked up, he racked up multiple violations, fighting with other inmates, threatening prison staff, and what officials called malicious conduct. The man was denied parole twice because of his behavior behind bars. Pay attention to this part because it's important. So Darren Jenkins was finally released on March 25th. It wasn't because he had changed or because he had found God or completed rehabilitation programs. No, it was automatic, a legal technicality. He had served his time on paper, but his heart, his mind, that was a different story entirely. But Dana Jenkins didn't see any of that. All she saw was her son coming home. She had been counting down to this day for years. She cleaned that house from top to bottom, cooked his favorite meals, and told everyone who would listen that this was their second chance. When she picked him up from that correctional facility, she greeted him with open arms and tears streaming down her face. To Dana, this was the answer to years of prayers, the end of a painful chapter, the beginning of something new. Here's where things get interesting, and I need everyone listening to really hear this part. The man Dana brought home was not the boy she remembered. There was a welcome home celebration. Family gathered on Snowden Drive. There were balloons tied to the porch railing and a handmade banner that read "Welcome Home." Pictures from that day showed Dana beaming with pride, standing next to her son with her arm around his waist. But look closer at those photos. While everyone else is smiling, celebrating, happy to have family back together, Darren is staring blankly into the camera. His face is expressionless, almost distant, cold. That unease wasn't just captured in pictures. The family felt it. Dana's cousin Juanita, the same woman who lived next door, noticed something was wrong immediately. She said you could see it.
You can just see he was so fidgetive. He was so anxious. He could not stay still. He had that sneakiness about him. You know what I mean? Like a crazy person trying to get ready to do something, like premeditation.
The family thought something was off. They felt it in their gut. But nobody wanted to say anything because Dana was so happy. She was so hopeful, so convinced that love and faith could turn this situation around. I know exactly what you're thinking right now. How do you tell a mother that the son she's been praying for, the son she's been waiting for, might be dangerous? How do you take that hope away from someone who has been holding on to it for 3 years? But here's what happened in those first few days after Darren came home. The celebration ended, but the strange behavior continued. He barely spoke to anyone. He would pace the house at odd hours, opening and closing doors, checking windows, mumbling things nobody could understand. He'd stare out into the yard for long periods, completely still. Sometimes he'd freeze mid-conversation, his eyes going blank like his mind was somewhere else entirely. Then he'd snap back and say, "I'm good," before walking away. Family members described him as fidgety, anxious, paranoid. One relative said he looked like a bomb ticking down. Another said he seemed like a man just out of a war zone, or like someone still inside one. But here's the detail that should have made everyone stop and think. One night, someone caught Darren just standing in the hallway outside the bedrooms. Just standing there. Still and silent. Watching, waiting. Nobody knew what he was thinking, but everybody knew something wasn't right. Then came the injury. One morning, Darren showed up with his hand wrapped in a makeshift bandage. When family asked what happened, he offered no explanation. Just shrugged it off, like it was nothing. But that silence around the wound said everything. And still nobody confronted him. Nobody pushed for answers. Because they didn't want to hurt Dana. She was so happy to have her son home. So convinced he was turning over a new leaf. The last thing anyone wanted to do was destroy that hope she had been holding on to for so long. So they stayed quiet. Even when he asked Dana for $200 to get some things he needs, she handed it over without hesitation. That's what mothers do, right? We provide, we support, we believe. But police would later confirm that Darren Jenkins used that $200 to buy bleach, duct tape, and a hunting knife. The receipt was dated just days before the murders. Let that sink in for a moment. Dana Jenkins and her desire to help her son get back on his feet unknowingly funded her own demise. People saw the signs. They felt the danger in their bones. Dana's cousin Juanita later admitted, "I dreaded this day would come." You could see it in him. He wasn't right, but they stayed silent. Out of love, out of loyalty, out of respect for a mother who had waited 3 long years for this reunion. That silence became fatal. March 31st, 2025. It was a Monday. Ordinary in every way, until it wasn't. At 5:30 in the evening, Wilson County Emergency Dispatch received a call. The voice on the line was unclear, confused. The dispatcher couldn't quite make out what was happening, only that something was deeply wrong at a house on Snowden Drive.
Officers were immediately sent to that quiet street where just 6 days earlier balloons had been tied to a porch railing and a welcome home banner had been hanging with pride. When police arrived, everything outside looked normal. Dana's car was parked in the driveway. The porch light was on. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered glass, no sounds coming from inside. But that silence, that heavy, thick silence, it told them everything they needed to know. What those officers found when they entered that house would stay with them forever. Dana Jenkins, 50 years old, and her 15-year-old son Darren Cox were found dead inside their home. Both had been attacked with what investigators described as extreme violence. This wasn't random. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was rage that had been building, and then unleashed with terrifying precision. Dana, the woman who had believed so deeply in love and forgiveness, was reportedly found near the front of the house. Her body showed she had fought. She had tried to protect herself, tried to protect her son. Darren, her baby, her 15-year-old honors student who was supposed to become a pastor, was found further inside the house, as if he had tried to run, as if he had tried to escape the nightmare that was unfolding in his own home. He didn't make it. Now here's what shook even the most experienced first responders. One officer later described what they walked into as something you only expect to see in war, not in a mother's living room.
And then came the most haunting detail of all. Darren Jenkins, 25 years old, the man Dana had welcomed home with open arms just 6 days earlier, was still at the scene when police arrived. He didn't run, he didn't try to hide, he didn't resist arrest. He was calm, eerily calm. When officers took him into custody, there was no struggle, no emotion, no explanation, just quiet acceptance, like a man who had completed a task he had been planning for days. Let me be clear about something. This wasn't a moment of madness. This wasn't someone who snapped under pressure. Evidence would later show that this was calculated, planned, deliberate. Remember that $200 Dana gave him? Remember those things he said he needed? Police confirmed he used that money to purchase bleach for cleanup, duct tape for control, and a hunting knife for the attack. The receipt was dated just days before he took their lives. Within hours of the discovery, Darren Jenkins was officially charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was taken to Wilson County Jail, where he remains without bond. Just 6 days earlier, Dana had thanked God on Facebook for bringing her son home. Now the community was asking how God could allow this son to take everything away from her. News of the double tragedy spread through Wilson like wildfire.
This house, this duplex, his mom's home, apartment A, where police found the suspect as well as the bodies of his mother and little brother.
He knew they was coming to get him.
Wilson police arrested and charged 25-year-old Darren Dante Jenkins with 2 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of his mom, 50-year-old Dana Vanessa Jenkins, and his little brother, a 15-year-old.
This is a small community where people know each other, where families go to church together, where children grow up together. When something this shocking happens, it doesn't just affect one family, it affects everyone. At Mount Moriah Community Church, where both Dana and Darren had been faithful members, the grief hit like a tidal wave. Bishop Sherman Blandon, who had prayed alongside Dana for years and watched Darren grow into the young man he was becoming, opened the church doors for an emergency prayer service the very next evening. The sanctuary filled within minutes. People came looking for answers, looking for comfort, looking for something to hold on to. But even Bishop Blandon, a man of deep faith, could barely find words. He told the congregation, his voice shaking with emotion, "Even as a man of faith, I have questions." At Bedingfield High School, the impact was immediate and devastating. Darren's empty desk became a symbol of everything the school had lost. His teachers, who had watched this young man excel academically and show such promise for the future, struggled to keep it together. Counselors were brought in to help students process what had happened to someone they looked up to, someone who had been planning to dedicate his life to serving God. The church's youth group, the same kids Darren had worked with running lights and cameras during services, gathered for a special session to honor their friend. These teenagers, who should have been worried about homework and weekend plans, were now sitting in a circle trying to understand why someone so good, so gentle, so full of promise, could be taken in such a brutal way. Here's what gets me about this whole situation. The community knew something was wrong. Family members felt it. Neighbors sensed it. But nobody wanted to be the one to speak up and potentially destroy Dana's happiness. Can we talk about this for a second? Because this is something we see too often in our community. We love our family members so much. We care about their feelings so deeply that we stay quiet when we should be shouting warnings from the rooftops. Dana's cousin Juanita, who lived right next door and saw Darren's behavior firsthand, later said, "I couldn't figure out why he did it and what for." But she also admitted she had sensed danger. She had seen the signs, the blank stare, the weird behavior, the way he carried himself like someone who was planning something. But she didn't call the police. She didn't stage an intervention. She didn't force a conversation with Dana about what she was seeing, because she didn't want to hurt her cousin's feelings. She didn't want to be the one to take away Dana's hope, and I understand that, I really do. Because when you love someone, when you see them happy after years of pain, the last thing you want to do is destroy that joy. But sometimes love means having difficult conversations. Sometimes love means saying the hard things that nobody wants to hear. Online, the tributes started pouring in immediately. Instagram posts filled with candle emojis and photos of Dana and Darren, quotes from scripture, messages of love and condolence, but also questions. So many questions about how this could have been prevented. One post read, "You were the sweetest soul, Darren. You deserve the world. I hope heaven is brighter with you in it." Another simply said, "She loved that boy more than life itself. Now they're gone. Together." The funeral for Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox was held on April 12th, just 12 days after their lives were taken. Ellen Forbes of WB Tabernacle was packed beyond capacity. Family, friends, teachers, neighbors, and even strangers who had heard their story and felt called to pay their respects filled every pew. Pastor Damon Royal delivered a eulogy that focused on the love Dana and Darren had shared, the joy they had brought to their community, and the legacy they left behind. He chose to honor their lives rather than dwell on the horror of how those lives ended. The following day, their bodies were laid to rest side by side at Rest Haven Cemetery. As the final prayer was spoken and flowers were placed on the fresh earth, one thing became clear to everyone who was there. This wasn't just a family mourning two of their own. This was an entire community grieving the loss of two people who had made their world a little bit brighter. But even as they mourned, questions remained. How could this have happened? What signs were missed? And most importantly, what could have been done to prevent this tragedy? Now let me tell you what happened in that courtroom. Because this is where the full picture of what Darren Jenkins had become started to show. On April 1st, 2025, just one day after the attack, Darren appeared in court for the first time. And listen to this, he didn't cry. He didn't speak. He didn't even look at the gallery where his devastated family members sat holding each other, trying to make sense of what had happened. He just stared straight ahead, blank, empty, like a man waiting for a bus. Not like someone who had just been accused of taking the lives of his own mother and 15-year-old brother. The system failed Dana and Darren. There was no mental health evaluation before his release. No assessment of whether he was safe to return to society. No warning to the family who was preparing to welcome him home. Just a date on a calendar and a ride back to Wilson. Dana never stood a chance. Now I want to talk to this community about something important. Because what happened to Dana Jenkins is not unique. Across this country, families are doing exactly what she did. They're cleaning bedrooms for sons coming home from prison. They're cooking favorite meals and posting on social media about second chances. They're opening their doors and their hearts without realizing they might be inviting danger into their homes. They're hoping, they're praying. They're believing that love is enough to change someone who doesn't want to be changed. But sometimes love becomes a trap. Sometimes the person you're trying to save was never reaching for your hand in the first place. Sometimes they're standing behind you with something sharp in their grip, just waiting for the right moment. We cannot keep ignoring the warning signs. We cannot keep mistaking silence for peace. We cannot keep choosing politeness over protection. Because Dana Jenkins didn't fail her son. She loved him exactly the way a mother should love her child. Unconditionally, completely. Without reservation, but love alone couldn't save someone who had already decided he didn't want to be saved. Let me share something one of the community members said that really stuck with me. They wrote, "It is 100% okay to love your children from a safe distance." Read that again. Love your children from a safe distance. Another person said loving someone who doesn't want to be loved is deadly. These aren't cruel words. These aren't people giving up on family. These are people who understand that sometimes protecting yourself and your other children means making the hardest decision a parent can make. We saw this in the comments from people who have lived this nightmare. One mother shared, "This is why I love my oldest son from a distance. Too many times he's gotten upset and told me he would quote unquote hurt me. I've tried to get him help and it's the same. No sir, I love you but I have to stay away from you. If a person says they're going to do something to you, believe them." Another parent wrote, "I have a 45-year-old son that I refuse to invite into my peaceful sanctuary, which is my home. He refuses to get help, so my family invites him to family gatherings. But none of us will let him move into our homes, because the writing is on the wall. These parents aren't giving up on their children, they're protecting themselves and their other family members while still maintaining love and connection from a distance. That's wisdom, that's survival. And maybe Dana Jenkins and her son would still be alive today if she had done that. Here's what I need everyone listening to understand. Mental illness, trauma from prison, anger, resentment. None of these things excuse what Darren Jenkins did to his family, but they might explain it, and understanding the why can help other families recognize the signs before it's too late. The cousin who lived next door said it best. You could see it, the look, it told you everything. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. When your gut tells you something is wrong, listen to it. When family members express concerns about someone's behavior, don't dismiss them to keep the peace. Dana Jenkins was a woman of faith who believed in redemption, in second chances, in the power of love to heal broken people. Those are beautiful qualities, but they made her vulnerable to someone who saw her kindness as weakness and her hope as opportunity. In the end, it only took 6 days. 6 days from my baby is home. Lord, I thank you to 2 people dead on Snowden Drive. 6 days from celebration to devastation. 6 days from hope to heartbreak. This community lost 2 beautiful souls because of one man's choice to turn love into a weapon and family into a target. Dana Jenkins and Darren Cox deserved better. They deserved protection. They deserved warning. They deserved a system that actually evaluated whether someone was safe to return home. But most of all, they deserved to be remembered not for how their lives ended, but for how they lived. With faith, with love, with service to their community, and with the kind of bond between mother and son that most families can only dream of. Rest in peace, Dana and Darren. Your light continues to shine in the lives of everyone who knew you, and your story serves as both warning and testimony to the power of love and the importance of protection. To everyone listening, love your family fiercely, but love yourself enough to recognize when that love needs boundaries. Love yourself enough to speak up when something feels wrong. Love yourself enough to choose safety over sentiment, because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no to someone you care about. Sometimes saving yourself saves everyone else around you too. That's what this community needs to remember. That's what Dana's story teaches us, and that's what we owe to her memory. The wisdom to love safely and the courage to protect what matters most.